So higher interest rates aren't good for the economy. It slows business growth and piles on a ton of risk for companies trying to expand or even just stay afloat. And as the Fed continues to hike rates further, we are literally beginning to see a corporate collapse happen in the United States. Companies are going out of business, and this resilient economy, right, is a lie. We have Janet Yellen still peddling a fantasy. According to her, surprisingly resilient American consumers block the recession. And because the consumer is still resilient, interest rates can stay higher for longer. Now, I have no idea which universe she's referring to, but on planet Earth, within the United States itself, we are seeing a swath of business bankruptcies. The consumer is not resilient, and this is reflected in an alarming increase in corporate bankruptcy filings. And as more companies go under, job losses are going to increase. Consumer spending is going to take a hit, which isn't good for the economy. In our lead story today, August adds 57 more US corporate bankruptcies. 2023's collapse is the biggest over the past 2 years. We are heading dangerously close to the 2020 lockdown levels of bankruptcies. In just the first 8 months of the year, from January to August, we had nearly 460 companies filing for bankruptcy. And these are just companies worth more than $2 million. So just imagine the thousands and the tens of thousands of smaller businesses that have also collapsed. But here's the scary part. We still have 4 months more left to go, and more companies are going to get buried under the scourge of higher interest rates. And it is very important to look at the momentum of these bankruptcy filings. We can see more and more businesses collapsing as interest rates go from 0% to 5.5%. It is not a coincidence. And that's why Janet Yellen is extremely wrong about the resilient economy. The longer the Federal Reserve keeps rates high or hikes them even further, the real economy will implode further. Understand that Powell has lost control of the inflation fight. He can't control the price of oil. He can't rein in government spending, which is flowing to military and defense. And those industries are far detached from the real economy, guys. And as inflation stays high, he has no choice but to keep interest rates higher for longer. The Federal Reserve is already preempting us that there's going to be another rate hike this year, likely in November, because somehow the economy is booming and everything is fine. And this will put even more pressure on this fragile system, and the biggest casualties will be the small businesses. And during a meeting with the small business leaders, the small business community, the Federal Reserve got scolded. The small business community is sick and tired of the way Jerome Powell is handling the crisis. And this is bad news. If businesses lose faith in the Fed's ability to fight inflation without causing an implosion, they will go into defense mode. If you're a small business owner, you'll start scaling back, and firing workers isn't too far off the horizon. According to a small business owner, we were blindsided by inflation. Predictability is just gone. It's very hard to operate a business without predictability. And I can tell you from experience that running a small business isn't easy. Now, there are things you can control and things that you can't control. And the biggest factor out of your control is interest rates, because a big part of inflation is from the supply side. Powell can't really promise us when he can cut rates. We could actually hit up towards 6% and even stay there for the next 12 months for all we know, right? And this is freaking out small companies across America and the world. And when business owners get scared, they aren't going to expand. They aren't going to hire new workers. And we must focus on small businesses because that is the true beating heart of the US economy. The US Small Business Association estimates that 99.9% of all businesses in America have 500 employees or fewer. And these small enterprises generate 1.5 million jobs a year and accounts for 64% of new hiring across the country. In fact, 44% of US economic activity comes from small businesses. That's why even though Congress keeps spending endlessly to keep the economy afloat, a recession is still very possible. If enough small businesses collapse, GDP could fall faster than the effects of deficit spending. And in a report by the Wall Street Journal, the American Bankruptcy Institute revealed a shocking statistic. Nearly 1,500 small businesses filed for bankruptcy through September. That's nearly as many in 2022 and even more than the 2020 lockdowns. And this tells us the true damage of higher interest rates in the business community. Their costs are increasing, their loan payments are increasing, while consumers are spending less and less thanks to inflation. Now, small businesses just don't have enough cash left to survive, and it's just a matter of time before more closures happen. Research shows that in July, 18% of them had no access to additional cash, up 3% from January last year. And because of this, 8.3% of small businesses have a big risk of closing down. And this number is only going to grow bigger, it's only going to go higher as rates stay high for longer. This is the canary in the coal mine. As bankruptcies continue to pile up, this is going to aggravate consumer spending further, which could trigger a domino effect on the big boys. And there's also another headwind coming for companies. Credit is going to dry up further because US banks will be facing a challenging environment over the next 2 years. And it's important to realize that credit controls this economy. The money has to keep flowing from the banks to the businesses and consumers, or the entire system literally freezes up. And this credit squeeze is going to hit the banks real hard. Strategists are warning that a recession is likely in 2024 because companies face a huge refinancing shock at high interest rates. It's not just the US government borrowing money, but the entire corporate America as well. And with interest rates going up, companies are going to have a heart attack when it's time to roll over their debt. According to Fidelity, this is going to be a big jump that could grind the economy to a halt. A company which financed itself at 2, 3, or 4% is going to be refinancing at 10, 11, or 12% now. That's a huge shock. So just imagine your interest payments tripling over the course of a year. You'll be making some tough decisions. Either you stop taking on additional debt, or you start to scale it down, or you take on the risk and potentially default if you miscalculate down the road, which is very high considering we are moving towards a global recession. So if you're a lender giving out loans to these companies, what are you going to do? You'll be forced to jack up interest rates even further to account for the added risk of defaults. So both sides of the equation are doubly screwed. Famous economist Al Arian is sounding the alarm of this refinancing coming for the banks next year. The biggest risk comes from the high yield loans, especially the ones from commercial real estate. Commercial real estate has been one of the hardest hit sectors in the entire US economy. And this shouldn't come as a surprise. You combine the new work from home situation plus businesses collapsing. What's really the point of leasing out new office spaces? You want to cut costs, you cut short your leases, and it's all about survival now. And let's quantify the damage done. CRE prices have dropped by at least 16% since the peak in March 2022. There's also a mountain of $1.5 trillion worth of debt set to mature by 2025. And this is extreme amount of refinancing pressure that's going to hit the banks. If landlords decide to abandon their buildings and just throw the keys at the banks, they are screwed. They'll be left with a big hole in their balance sheet. Not only is their income stream cut away, they are now left with a bunch of commercial properties that are falling in price. So the banks will be forced to sell these office buildings, all these hotels at fire sale prices. They'll be selling to a falling market and getting maybe 50, 60, or maybe even 70 cents on the dollar if they are lucky. And in this environment, bank credit is going to be tight and they'll be too terrified to lend money to businesses. So I hope you can see how interconnected this whole economy is. If one part starts to collapse, especially the banks, there is a domino effect that can take down the entire system. The health of businesses in America isn't good, and I don't care what Joe Biden says, Bidenomics isn't working. In fact, it is going to implode the real economy. Goldman Sachs is sounding the alarm bells. In fact, they are screaming from the top of the building. A 1.8 trillion wall of corporate debt is coming due, and this is going to cost people a ton of jobs. It has always been about interest rates. The higher they go, the more damage this will do to the real economy. Yes, the US government can borrow endlessly because of the power of the US dollar, but on Main Street, it is a totally different story. We find that for each additional dollar of interest expense, firms lower their capital expenditures by 10 cents and labor costs by 20 cents. And here's the tragic part. Half of the reductions comes from job firings and the other half will be from lower wages. And this is going to reduce the monthly payrolls by up to 10,000 jobs by 2025. And these are just the numbers of companies that can pay back their debt. What about those that just throw in the towel like in all those Rocky movies? What if they can't take any more punches to the face, to the gut? And I wish I could sell you a fantasy, but things are getting from bad to worse in these streets. Debt defaults have surged at insane 176% in the first 8 months of the year. As many as 69 companies missed their debt payments compared to just 25 last year. And these are companies borrowing money from investors in the bond market. It's not just China's Evergrande that's missing their bond payments. American companies are also behind their payments as well. Interest rates are just too high for businesses to survive. And the more companies default, investors are gonna demand a higher interest rate. Well, what does this do? Let's just think about it. It just pushes companies closer and closer towards the next wave of defaults. Corporate defaults are moving dangerously fast towards the 2020 levels. We are now at 4.75% of companies defaulting on their debt obligations. And notice how this wasn't a problem when rates were low. And this is not a sign of a strong economy. This is an economy that is addicted to artificially low interest rates, and things are not going to get better. In a story by Bloomberg, PIMCO, the world's biggest bond manager, is warning of additional rate hikes coming in 2024. It is not impossible, and we must be prepared. Bond yields across the board could head up, and this is very bad news for businesses. There's really no road left to kick the can further down to. If rates smash past 6% or higher, we could see unemployment start to skyrocket. We also see consumer spending crater to hell, and this is fast becoming a reality. And I want to re-emphasize that government spending can't solve everything. The US economy is still powered by private companies, and their survival is based on consumer spending. And this is where things get really grim. Student loan payments are going to resume for 40 million Americans, and this is going to squeeze consumer spending even further. We are talking about more than $1.7 trillion in federal student loan debt getting repaid. The Wall Street Journal expects up to $100 billion getting diverted away into repaying those student loans. And this is a nightmare because it's money that normally goes into discretionary spending like clothes, laptops, and dining out. And the businesses impacted aren't the defense contractors, but local stores and diners. Even Walmart and Home Depot are going to get slapped in the face. So you can just imagine the pressure being stacked up. The economy is about to get rug pulled, and businesses are the true victims. Interest rates are going to go up, so cheap money is now gone. Consumer spending is also depleting fast. If you want to gauge how weak the consumer is, we just need to look at credit card debt. In July alone, US consumers added $10.4 billion in debt, and this is money that has to be paid back down the road at well over 20% interest rates. Consumers can't borrow forever, and spending is going to crater when people realize the truth, when they realize that interest payments alone will swallow them whole. A recession in 2024 is on the cards, and everyday interest rates stay high, the probability is growing bigger and bigger. And it's really insane the level of delusion the market has. We have people from the Federal Reserve predicting a 0% recession over the next 12 months. They believe a soft landing is coming, and this tells us they don't even have a clue what's going on in the real economy. They are not in the business of monetary policy, but perception control. But pay attention to the real people on the ground, the consumers and the CEOs of US companies. People on the ground are polling 69% of a recession coming, while companies believe it's actually 84%. And these are people on the street seeing inflation destroy their budgets. These are companies they are seeing their bottom line shrink month after month. So we have to prepare for more bankruptcies coming and the economy crashing if the real economy collapses fast enough. Not even endless government spending can save the day. But let me know what you think in the comments below. How bad is this situation? Let me know in the comments. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.